Marissa Vale signed the divorce papers with trembling hands while her husband smiled beside his mother, both convinced they had stripped her of everything. They threw her clothes onto the driveway, mocked her tears, and watched her leave in a borrowed car, never imagining that hours earlier, a sealed letter had named her the sole heir to a $180 million real estate empire, the very company that paid their bills, funded their luxuries, and kept their family's reputation alive. For months, Marissa stayed silent. She rebuilt herself in private while her ex-husband flaunted his mistress, the woman he planned to marry, in the grandest venue his family could afford. Then came the invitation, cruelly sent to humiliate her one last time. But on the wedding day, just as the guests rose and the bride began her walk, a black Rolls-Royce pulled up outside the chapel. Marissa stepped out, dressed like power itself, carrying a folder that would change every life in that room. Her ex laughed, until she announced who really owned his family's company, their mansions, their cars, and even the wedding venue. By sunset, the celebration was over, and so was their dynasty forever. The invitation had arrived in a pearl-colored envelope, thick enough to feel expensive and cruel enough to be intentional. Marissa found it tucked between a bank statement and a flyer for a grocery store sale, waiting in the small brass mailbox outside the townhouse she had rented under her maiden name. For a moment, she did not touch it. She only stared at the gold lettering, the curling script, the embossed crest of the Whitmore family pressed into the flap like a warning. She knew that crest. She had once sat at Evelyn Whitmore's dining table, polishing those same silver-printed invitations for charity luncheons, her fingers aching while Evelyn corrected the angle of each place card. A family name must always look effortless, Evelyn used to say, watching Marissa as if she were furniture that had learned to breathe. That is something women like you rarely understand. Women like you. Marissa had been married to Lucas Whitmore for 6 years, yet his mother had never allowed her to forget that she had entered the family without the correct shoes, schools, or last name. Marissa Vale had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment over a laundromat on the east side of the city. Her mother, Elena, cleaned offices at night and altered wedding gowns on weekends. Her father had disappeared before Marissa learned to write his name. The first time Lucas brought her home, Evelyn smiled with her lips closed and asked what line the Vales were in, as though people came from product categories. Marissa, 19 then and painfully eager to be liked, answered honestly. "My mother sews. I work part-time at a property management office." Evelyn had lifted her teacup with 2 fingers. How resourceful. Lucas squeezed Marissa's knee under the table and whispered later that his mother was simply old-fashioned, not cruel. Marissa believed him because love had a way of making excuses before facts could form. Now, standing by the townhouse mailbox with the wedding invitation in her hand, she knew the difference. The invitation was not merely an announcement, it was a blade polished until it gleamed. "Mr. Lucas Whitmore and Miss Camilla Hart request the honor of your presence." Camilla Hart. Marissa remembered the first time she saw Camilla clearly, though the memory came wrapped in perfume and denial. It had been at a company holiday gala at the Crystal Meridian Hotel, where the chandeliers resembled upside-down gardens made of ice. Camilla was laughing beside Lucas near the champagne tower, her hand on his arm, her red dress catching light like a flame. When Marissa approached, Lucas introduced Camilla as a consultant from acquisitions. Camilla tilted her head and smiled in a way that made Marissa feel she had interrupted a private joke. "You're Marissa," Camilla had said. "Lucas talks about you." "Not much," her eyes added. That night, Evelyn insisted Marissa had imagined the tension. "A woman with insecurity sees betrayal in every room," Evelyn said, fastening her diamond bracelet while Marissa stood behind her, still wearing the navy dress Lucas said was too plain. "Men of Lucas's status attract admiration. A wife must learn not to embarrass herself." But embarrassment was not the word for finding lipstick on her husband's collar 3 months later. It was not the word for late-night phone calls that ended when she entered the room. It was not the word for seeing Lucas's car parked outside Camilla's building on a Wednesday afternoon when he had sworn he was meeting investors across town. Embarrassment was what they wanted her to feel when they finally stopped hiding it. The divorce had not been Lucas's idea at first. He preferred the comfort of betrayal without consequence. It was Evelyn who pushed him, Evelyn who said the family could not survive scandal if Camilla became pregnant before the legal paperwork was settled. Evelyn who told Marissa during a Sunday dinner that barren branches should not cling to the tree. Marissa had been trying to have a child for 4 years. No one at that table looked at her when Evelyn said it. Lucas cut into his steak. His younger brother, Brent, checked his phone. His Aunt Patricia asked for more wine. Only old Gideon Harlow, seated at the far end as the family's longtime business partner and the honorary uncle everyone tolerated for his money, looked up. His eyes, sharp even in his age, met Marissa's across the candlelight. "Trees," Gideon said quietly, "have deeper roots than people think." Evelyn's smile tightened. How poetic. Gideon returned to his soup, but Marissa never forgot his words. At the time, she did not know that he had known her mother. She did not know that many years ago, before Harlow Estate Group became a titan of commercial towers, luxury apartments, and old-money neighborhoods, Gideon had rented his first office above the laundromat where Alina Vale worked nights. She did not know that Alina had once stitched the torn lining of Gideon's only good suit for free before a meeting that saved his company. She did not know Gideon had kept a photograph of Alina standing proudly beside that sewing machine, Marissa asleep in a basket nearby. She knew only that Gideon was kind to her when the Whitmores were not. At company dinners, he asked what books she was reading. At charity auctions, he waited while she finished a sentence. When Lucas dismissed Marissa's suggestions about renovating older apartment buildings instead of demolishing them, Gideon would lean back and say, "Let her speak. She understands walls because she listens to them." Lucas hated that. "You don't need to perform intelligence for Gideon," he snapped once in their bedroom after a board dinner. "He likes charity cases. Don't confuse pity with respect." Marissa had been brushing her hair at the vanity. In the mirror, she saw Lucas loosen his tie with the irritated grace of a man who had never questioned whether the world would make room for him. "I wasn't performing," she said. Lucas laughed. "You were talking about tenant retention like you invented morality. I talked about families being priced out of buildings they had lived in for decades." "And there it is," he said, "the laundromat girl in you." The words landed softly, almost casually, which made them worse. Marissa set down the brush. "My mother worked hard." "Yes, and now you don't have to. That's called progress." For years, she swallowed moments like that. She told herself marriage was patience. She told herself Lucas was pressured by Evelyn, by expectations, by the company. She told herself people could be unkind without meaning to be cruel. But cruelty, she later learned, was not always rage. Sometimes it was a pattern. Sometimes it wore a tailored suit and kissed your forehead before leaving for another woman's apartment. The day the divorce papers were signed, rain had been falling in thin gray threads against the courthouse windows. Marissa sat across from Lucas at a conference table, hands folded over the envelope in her purse. Her lawyer, Ms. Cohen, had advised her to delay. "You received the letter this morning," Ms. Cohen whispered before the meeting. "That changes everything." Marissa had looked down at the sealed document with Gideon Harlow's crest pressed into red wax. Gideon had died 2 weeks earlier after a sudden stroke. His funeral had been grand, cold, full of people praising his generosity while calculating his vacancies. Marissa had stood in the back wearing a black coat Lucas said made her look dramatic. At dawn on the day of the divorce, a courier arrived at her apartment with Gideon's final letter. "My dear Marissa, by the time you read this, I will have gone where even Evelyn Whitmore cannot send a bill." She had laughed then, unexpectedly, through tears. The letter continued in Gideon's slanted handwriting, each line steady and deliberate. "I have watched you be underestimated by people who profit from your silence. I have also watched you understand this company better than the men who brag about owning it. They believe blood makes heirs. I believe stewardship does. There are things you do not yet know. There are debts hidden under polished floors. There are signatures made in rooms where you were told to serve coffee instead of speak. There are properties leveraged 3 times over by people who thought the foundation would never be inspected. You are my heir, Marissa, not because you were wronged, but because you were worthy before anyone wronged you. Attached were preliminary papers naming her the sole beneficiary of Harlow Estate Group and all its subsidiaries, pending final court certification. Ms. Cohen confirmed the documents were real. She also confirmed something else. The Whitmores did not yet know. They work for Harlow Estate Group, Ms. Cohen said. They don't own it. Evelyn's lifestyle, Lucas's executive title, Brent's development contracts, Patricia's consulting retainers, the family mansions, they all connect back to Harlow assets. Gideon gave them influence, not control. Marissa sat very still. And now, Ms. Cohen said, assuming probate confirms what this says, that influence ends with you. That should have been the moment Marissa walked into the divorce room like thunder. Instead, she signed. Lucas gave her almost nothing, not the house, not the car, not even the art she had chosen for the hallway, because he claimed it had appreciated under his family's care. Evelyn sat beside him in a cream suit, her pearl necklace glowing against her throat. When Marissa hesitated over the final page, Evelyn sighed. Really, Marissa, dignity costs nothing. At least leave with that. Marissa looked up. A strange calm moved through her, cold and clear. She thought of Gideon's letter. She thought of her mother bent over a sewing machine, saving scraps of satin in cookie tins because waste was a sin. She thought of every room where she had been treated as temporary. Then she signed. Lucas smiled as if he had won a war. Outside the courthouse, Evelyn told the driver not to make room for Marissa. You have somewhere to go, don't you? Evelyn asked. Marissa did. She went home to find her clothes on the driveway. The Whitmore house, a limestone mansion with ivy climbing the east wall, had never truly felt like hers. Still, seeing her sweaters, books, shoes, and framed photographs dumped on wet pavement felt like watching a life being buried without a grave. The rain darkened everything. A cardboard box split open near the rose bushes, spilling letters Lucas had written her before his love curdled into possession. Brent stood on the front steps, recording with his phone. Need help packing, he called. Patricia laughed from behind him. Evelyn stood beneath the portico, dry as judgment. Lucas emerged last, one hand in his pocket. I told you it would be easier if you didn't make this emotional. Marissa picked up a soaked photograph of her mother and herself at her college graduation. The glass had cracked across Elena's face. You could have sent my things, Marissa said. Evelyn looked at the ruined boxes. We did. A neighbor's old gardener, Mr. Alvarez, saw her struggling and offered the use of his pickup truck. He said nothing as he helped load what could be saved. When Marissa thanked him, his eyes moved toward the house with quiet disgust. Houses know, he said in his accented English. They know who belongs. The phrase stayed with her. So did the way Evelyn's face looked when Marissa turned back once from the passenger seat. Not victorious. Not exactly. For one flicker of a second, Evelyn looked uneasy, as if some draft had passed through a locked room. Perhaps she sensed what was coming. Perhaps the house knew before she did. In the months that followed, Marissa did not collapse the way they expected. She did not post bitter messages, call Lucas late at night, or beg mutual friends to take sides. Silence became her shelter, then her weapon. Probate moved forward. Gideon's lawyers gathered in conference rooms with frosted glass and spoke in careful phrases. Estate transfer, controlling interest, asset reconciliation, fiduciary review. Marissa listened more than she spoke. She wore simple black dresses and took notes in a leather-bound notebook Gideon had left her. The first page contained a sentence in his handwriting. When people build on rot, do not warn them about the floor. At first, the scale of what she had inherited frightened her. Harlow Estate Group owned apartment towers, shopping plazas, warehouses, luxury residences, office parks, undeveloped land, and historic buildings waiting for restoration. Its holdings reached across 3 states. Its accounts were tangled with partnerships, shell companies, renovation loans, tax structures, and long-term leases. And running through that empire like ivy through brick were the Whitmores. Lucas was Senior Vice President of Strategic Development, a title Gideon had given him years earlier to appease Evelyn after Lucas failed twice to launch his own firm. Brent held contracts through a construction company that overbilled Harlow projects. Patricia received monthly consulting fees for community relations despite rarely entering the office. Evelyn chaired the Harlow Foundation, using its galas as personal coronations. The family home was not owned by the Whitmores at all. It belonged to a Harlow subsidiary, leased to Evelyn under terms so favorable they were almost fictional. The more Marissa learned, the more Gideon's foreshadowing sharpened into fact. There are debts hidden under polished floors. She found them. Not alone. She hired forensic accountants, auditors, attorneys, and a retired investigator named June Park, who had once worked financial crimes and now carried peppermint candies in one pocket and subpoenas in the other. June did not waste words. Your ex-husband's family treated the company like a private pantry, she said after 2 weeks. They ate from every shelf. Marissa sat in Gideon's old office on the 41st floor of Harlow Tower, watching rain drag silver lines down the windows. The office still smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Gideon's cane rested in the corner because no one had moved it. Can it be proven? Marissa asked. June tapped a folder. Most of it. Some of it is unethical but legal. Some of it is very not legal. Your former brother-in-law billed for materials never delivered. Your ex-husband approved inflated acquisition reports tied to Camilla Hart's consulting firm. Your former mother-in-law used foundation funds for personal events. The aunt is mostly just expensive. Marissa almost smiled. And Lucas? June's expression cooled. Lucas signed enough documents to ruin himself twice. The name Camilla Hart appeared again and again. Camilla had not been merely Lucas's mistress. She had built a boutique consulting company that fed on Harlow contracts Lucas approved. Market studies, acquisition projections, tenant displacement risk assessments, polished reports with recycled data, and inflated fees. Some reports recommended purchases that benefited entities quietly connected to Whitmore relatives. Others undervalued properties later flipped through side deals. It was not a love affair, it was an ecosystem. Marissa spent nights reading files until the city lights blurred. Sometimes she heard Lucas's old voice in her memory. You don't understand how these things work. The first time he said it, they were newly married. He had brought her to Harlow Tower for lunch, proud to show off the executive floor. Marissa had noticed a maintenance worker standing in the hallway with a stack of complaint forms. The heating system at Briar Court failed again, the worker told Lucas. Tenants are upset. Lucas barely glanced at him. Send it through facilities. They did 3 times. Marissa looked at Lucas. Briar Court is mostly elderly tenants, isn't it? Lucas gave her a patient smile. Yes, sweetheart, and every tenant thinks a draft is an emergency. Later, she asked Gideon about it. He sent her with him to Briar Court the next day. She remembered that building vividly. Cracked terrazzo floors, radiators clanking like old bones, Mrs. Donnelly in 4B wearing 2 sweaters in her own kitchen. Marissa sat at Mrs. Donnelly's table drinking weak tea while Gideon listened to complaints without interruption. He took notes himself. On the ride back, Gideon said, Lucas sees properties, you see homes, there's a difference. At the time, Marissa thought it was only a compliment. Years later, in Gideon's office, surrounded by proof of what Lucas had done, she realized it had been a warning. By the 2nd month after the divorce, Marissa had moved from survival into strategy. She visited properties unannounced. She met building managers without cameras. She asked janitors, receptionists, leasing agents, and maintenance crews what the executives never asked. She discovered that loyalty to the Whitmores was thinner than Evelyn imagined. Many employees had endured years of condescension because Harlow paid their salaries and Gideon had protected them when he could. Once they learned Marissa Vale had inherited control, they began speaking. One receptionist cried while telling Marissa how Evelyn had demanded she return a Christmas bonus because clerical girls shouldn't expect executive-level gratitude. A project manager showed records of Brent approving unsafe shortcuts at a luxury development. A young analyst admitted Lucas pressured him to alter projections on a hotel purchase. "Why didn't you tell Gideon?" Marissa asked. The analyst looked ashamed. "Mr. Harlow was sick, and Mr. Whitmore said if I crossed him, my career would end." Marissa closed the folder gently. "It won't." That became the beginning of her quiet rebuilding. She replaced compromised managers. She froze questionable contracts. She moved foundation accounts into review. She asked the board to convene without the Whitmores present, and one by one, directors who had once viewed her as Lucas's quiet wife began to understand that silence had not meant emptiness. It had meant observation. Still, she waited. Ms. Cohen urged caution. "We need the estate transfer finalized, the audit completed, and the debt exposure mapped. If we act too early, they can muddy the waters." June Park agreed. "Let arrogant people celebrate. They make mistakes when they think the cameras love them." So Marissa let them celebrate. Lucas and Camilla's engagement appeared online 3 months after the divorce. The photograph showed Lucas kneeling before Camilla beneath a canopy of white orchids. Evelyn stood nearby, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, though Marissa knew Evelyn's tears had always been stage-trained. The caption read, "A love worth waiting for." Marissa stared at the photo for a long time. Not because it broke her heart, that surprised her. The pain came, yes, but thinner than before, like an old bruise pressed by accident. What truly struck her was the background. The proposal had taken place in the atrium of the Whitmore Cultural Center, a building owned by Harlow Estate Group. Her building. The orchids had likely been paid for through the foundation. Her foundation. Lucas's tuxedo had probably been purchased on a company expense card. Her company. The realization did not make her laugh. It made her sit back and breathe slowly, because power, when it arrived after humiliation, could become a dangerous thing. Gideon had warned her of that too, in a memory she had nearly forgotten. Years earlier, at a charity auction, a developer who had mocked Marissa's little tenant opinions lost a bidding war to Gideon over a historic theater. Marissa, angry on Gideon's behalf, asked why he did not crush men like that when he had the means. Gideon studied the auction paddle in his hand. Revenge is a hammer, justice is a key. One breaks doors, the other opens the right ones and locks the wrong ones. Now, sitting alone, with Lucas's engagement photo glowing on her laptop, Marissa whispered, "A key." She looked at Gideon's cane in the corner. The brass handle was shaped like a lion's head. A key ring hung from it, one old skeleton key darker than the others. Gideon had carried it for decades, though it opened nothing in the modern offices. When she once asked what it was for, he said, "A door I haven't found yet." She thought that answer strange then. Now she wondered if people sometimes left keys for those who would know when to use them. The wedding planning became a spectacle. Evelyn announced that the ceremony would take place at St. Aurelia's Chapel, followed by a reception at the Meridian House, the city's most exclusive event venue. The Meridian House was a restored Gilded Age mansion with marble staircases, painted ceilings, and gardens designed for photographs that made wealth look inevitable. Marissa had once suggested holding a Harlow Foundation fundraiser there to raise money for tenant legal aid. Evelyn dismissed the idea. "Meridian is for legacy families," she said, "not activism." What Evelyn either forgot or never knew was that the Meridian House belonged to a Harlow subsidiary. Gideon had purchased it quietly after saving it from demolition. The Whitmores leased it often at steep discounts, telling guests they had connections. As spring turned towards summer, Marissa's legal team prepared the final moves. Notices were drafted. Employment terminations were reviewed. Lease violations were documented. Debt guarantees were traced. Personal assets purchased with misappropriated funds were identified. None of it was theatrical. All of it was devastating. Every page felt like a brick removed from the Whitmore castle. Yet Marissa still hesitated over the wedding. "Do you actually want to attend?" Ms. Cohen asked. They were in a conference room at Harlow Tower. Outside, evening spread copper across the skyline. On the table lay the wedding invitation Evelyn had sent, along with a handwritten note. "Dear Marissa, Lucas and Camilla believe in fresh beginnings. We hope you will attend with grace and finally release the past. Warmly, Evelyn." The cruelty was in the word grace. Evelyn had always used it when asking Marissa to accept insult politely. June Parks snorted when she read it. "That woman writes like a velvet knife." Marissa touched the edge of the invitation. "If I don't go, they'll tell everyone I'm broken. Let them. If I send lawyers, they'll call it bitterness. Let them." Marissa looked up. "If I stand there myself, no one can misunderstand." Ms. Cohen folded her hands. "Then we do it carefully. You will not make accusations we can't support. You will not threaten. You will not humiliate for sport." Marissa's eyes moved to Gideon's old notebook. "Justice is a key." "No," she said. "I'll unlock the door. They can decide whether to walk through it with dignity." But she already knew they would not. The week before the wedding, Marissa visited her mother's grave. Elena Vale was buried under a maple tree in a modest cemetery where the city noise softened but never disappeared. Marissa brought white carnations because Elena had never liked roses. "Roses are dramatic," Elena used to say, threading needles with impossible speed. "Carnations last. Be the kind of woman who lasts." Marissa knelt and brushed leaves from the stone. For a while she said nothing. The silence felt familiar but not empty. Childhood memories rose around her, Elena singing softly while hemming gowns for brides who never knew her name, Gideon Harlow appearing one winter evening with a torn coat and leaving with a repaired lining, Marissa at 11, hiding under the sewing table with a library book while rich women complained about beadwork. She remembered one bride in particular, a woman with a voice like breaking glass. "Make the waist smaller," the bride demanded. Elena measured carefully. "It will not close if I take more." "Then make it close." After the woman left, Marissa asked why people who had so much spoke as if everyone else had stolen from them. Elena tied off a thread. "Because some people do not own things, Mija, things own them." At 13, Marissa did not understand. At 32, she did. She placed the carnations in the vase. "I think Gideon remembered you," she whispered. "I think he remembered us." A breeze moved through the maple leaves. Somewhere nearby, a cemetery gate creaked like an old door. Marissa almost told her mother she was afraid of becoming hard, afraid that walking into Lucas's wedding would mean she had not truly moved on, afraid that wealth might change her into someone Evelyn would understand. Instead, she said, "I'm going to last." On the morning of the wedding, Lucas woke in the east wing of the Whitmore mansion, believing the world still belonged to him. The sun poured across his bedroom, catching on cufflinks laid beside a custom tuxedo. Brent lounged in an armchair drinking coffee and scrolling through messages. A photographer moved around the room, capturing staged moments of brotherly ease. Evelyn entered without knocking, inspecting everything from the boutonniere to the shine on Lucas's shoes. "Stand straighter," she said. Lucas laughed. "Mother, I'm not 12. Today you are a Whitmore before you are a groom." That pleased him. Lucas had spent his life absorbing the mythology of his last name. He believed Whitmores did not ask, they received. They did not fail, they were sabotaged. They did not apologize, they moved forward until everyone else adjusted. He thought of Marissa briefly while fastening his watch. Would she come? He hoped so, not because he missed her, though sometimes late at night he missed the quiet competence with which she had arranged his life. He missed his shirts appearing pressed, his speeches edited, his calendar remembered, his moods endured. Camilla was exciting, brilliant in a sharp-edged way, but she did not soften herself around him. She wanted as much as he did. Marissa had wanted him once. There had been comfort in that. He had sent the invitation himself, though Evelyn wrote the note. Camilla thought it was tasteless. "Why invite your ex-wife?" she asked, standing in the doorway of his apartment wearing one of his shirts. Lucas poured whiskey. Closure. Camilla raised an eyebrow. "For her or for you?" "For everyone," he said. "People should see she's fine." Camilla smiled. "You mean people should see you won?" He did not deny it. Now, in the mansion bedroom, Evelyn adjusted his pocket square. "Do you think she'll make a scene?" Brent asked. Evelyn's mouth curved. "Marissa, she doesn't have the spine." Lucas looked at himself in the mirror. For a moment, he remembered Marissa on their first anniversary, standing barefoot in the kitchen of their starter apartment before Evelyn insisted they move into the family mansion. She had burned the sauce and cried because she wanted the dinner to be perfect. Lucas had kissed flour from her cheek and told her perfection was overrated. He had meant it then. The memory irritated him. He pushed it away. "Even if she comes," he said, "she'll sit in the back." Evelyn smiled. "Where she belongs." Across the city, Marissa was dressing in silence. Her gown was not white, black, or red. She had chosen deep emerald silk, tailored simply, with long sleeves and a neckline that needed no jewelry. Around her throat she wore her mother's small gold cross. On her wrist, Gideon's watch. In her hand, when she left the townhouse, she carried the leather folder. Ms. Cohen waited downstairs beside the car. June Park stood near the curb, wearing a navy suit and sunglasses. The Rolls-Royce had been Gideon's, a vintage black Phantom he rarely used, but maintained perfectly. When Marissa first saw it in the Harlow garage, she thought of every bus ride she had taken with groceries cutting into her fingers. She almost refused to use it. Then she found a note in Gideon's vehicle file. For the day she needs arriving to speak before she opens her mouth. Gideon had known, not the wedding perhaps, but the shape of it, the inevitable room where people would judge her before she spoke. The driver, Mr. Bell, opened the door. "You ready, Ms. Vale?" he asked. Marissa looked at her reflection in the car window. She did not look like the woman on the driveway in the rain. She did not look like Evelyn's charity case or Lucas's discarded wife. But beneath the silk, the folder, the Rolls-Royce, she was still Elena's daughter. Still the girl who learned that stitches held best when tied from the inside. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm going." St. Aurelia's Chapel rose from a hill at the edge of the old district, all pale stone, stained glass, and bells that made every event feel blessed whether it deserved blessing or not. By noon, the street outside glittered with luxury cars. Guests in designer suits and pastel dresses climbed the steps beneath floral arches. Photographers shouted names. The Whitmore crest appeared on programs, napkins, ribbons, and the welcome sign near the entrance. Marissa noticed something else as the Rolls approached. The chapel's west garden wall still bore a small bronze plaque. "Restored by Harlow Estate Group." She took it as a sign. Inside, the chapel hummed with gossip. Evelyn sat in the front pew like a queen awaiting tribute. Lucas stood at the altar with Brent beside him, smiling too broadly. Camilla waited outside for her entrance, surrounded by bridesmaids in champagne satin. When the doors opened for the bride, everyone rose. That was when the Rolls stopped outside. At first, only a few guests turned. The chapel doors remained open to let in the procession light, so the sound of the car carried softly over the organ music. A murmur passed through the back pews. Someone whispered, "Who is that?" Lucas's smile faltered. Evelyn turned her head. Marissa stepped into the doorway. The organist hesitated but continued playing. Sunlight struck the emerald silk of Marissa's gown, setting it aglow against the chapel's pale stone. She did not rush. She did not perform. She walked down the aisle with Ms. Cohen, and June Park a few steps behind her, the leather folder held against her side. Every eye followed. Lucas blinked, as if his mind refused the image. Evelyn's face drained, then hardened. Camilla, visible beyond the door in her bridal gown, stared in disbelief as the moment meant to crown her was quietly stolen by a woman she had dismissed as history. Brent recovered first with a laugh. Well, look who upgraded. A few guests chuckled nervously. Lucas smiled, but there was strain in it. Marissa, this is unexpected. You invited me, she said. Her voice carried clearly. That surprised people. They remembered her as soft-spoken, which was not the same as weak. Evelyn rose from the front pew. This is neither the time nor the place. Marissa looked at her. I agree, you chose both. A ripple moved through the room. Camilla stepped inside, lifting her gown slightly. Lucas, what is this? Nothing, Lucas said quickly. She's just. Careful, Marissa said. One word, quiet, but it landed like a glass cracking. Lucas's eyes narrowed. Careful. Marissa opened the folder. Ms. Cohen moved to her side. Mrs. Whitmore. Don't call me that, Marissa said, still looking at Evelyn. I signed that name away. Evelyn's nostrils flared. You came here to embarrass yourself. No, Marissa said. I came because for 6 years, your family taught me the importance of public appearances. I assumed you would appreciate transparency in front of your guests. Lucas laughed, forcing charm back into his voice. If this is about the divorce settlement, talk to your lawyer. You agreed to everything. I did. Then what do you want? Marissa turned slightly so the room could hear her. I want to correct a misunderstanding. The chapel went still. For years, the Whitmore family has presented itself as the power behind Harlow Estate Group. Many of you were invited here under that impression. Many of you do business with them because of that impression. Some of you donated to their foundation events, invested in their developments, or trusted their recommendations because you believed they controlled the company. Evelyn stepped into the aisle. Stop this immediately. Marissa removed the first document from the folder. As of the final certification entered yesterday morning, Harlow Estate Group, valued at approximately $180 million, belongs to me. At first, the silence was too complete to be belief. Then the whispers began. Lucas's smile disappeared. Camilla looked at him. Lucas. That's impossible, Evelyn said. Ms. Cohen lifted a certified copy. It is not. Brent muttered a curse. Marissa continued. Gideon Harlow named me his sole heir, controlling shares, subsidiary assets, real estate holdings, foundation authority, and executive appointment powers transferred upon certification. Lucas took one step down from the altar. Gideon was old. He was manipulated. June Park smiled without warmth. That is a dangerous accusation to make without evidence. Lucas looked at June as if noticing her for the first time. Who are you? The woman who spent 3 months reading your signatures. Color crept up his neck. Marissa turned another page. This morning, formal notices were delivered to Harlow Tower, Whitmore Development Services, Hart Strategic Consulting, and the Harlow Foundation Board. Effective immediately, Lucas Whitmore is removed from all executive authority pending investigation into financial misconduct. Brent Whitmore's vendor contracts are terminated for cause. Patricia Whitmore's consulting arrangement is cancelled. Evelyn Whitmore is removed as chair of the Harlow Foundation. Evelyn gripped the pew beside her. You ungrateful little. Mrs. Whitmore, Ms. Cohen said sharply, I would advise restraint. Marissa did not raise her voice. The lease on the Whitmore residence has also been reviewed. Multiple violations were documented, including unauthorized renovations billed to Harlow subsidiaries, personal expenses misclassified as maintenance, and non-payment of required fees hidden through internal adjustments. Notice to vacate has been served. A woman in the second row gasped. Lucas stared at Marissa. you're evicting my mother." "No," Marissa said. "The company is enforcing a lease your family violated for years." "But you can't do that." "I can, I did." Camilla's face had gone pale beneath her bridal makeup. "Lucas, tell me this isn't real." Lucas snapped, "Not now." Marissa looked at Camilla then, really looked at her. For months, Marissa had imagined this woman as a monster with perfume, but standing there in her wedding gown, Camilla looked less monstrous than cornered. Ambitious, yes. Complicit, yes. But also afraid, as if she had mistaken a throne for a chair and only now realized it was collapsing. Hart Strategic Consulting received over $4 million in Harlow funds through contracts approved by Lucas, Marissa said. "Those contracts are under review. Any amount found fraudulent will be pursued." Camilla's lips parted. "I provided legitimate services." June Park lifted a folder of her own. "Then you'll enjoy proving that." The guests were no longer pretending this was a family matter. Phones appeared discreetly despite ushers' attempts to stop them. Business partners exchanged looks. Men who had laughed with Lucas at golf tournaments now studied the floor. Women who had praised Evelyn's taste began calculating how close they had stood to scandal. Evelyn saw it happening and panicked beneath her diamonds. "You think money makes you one of us," she hissed. "You are still the girl from above the laundromat." Marissa felt the words strike the old place. For a heartbeat, she saw the driveway in the rain, the cracked photograph, the boxes, her mother's tired hands. Then she saw Gideon across a candlelit table, saying roots ran deep. "Yes," Marissa said, "I am. That is why I know the value of a roof." The chapel seemed to hold its breath. "I know what it means to be put out in the rain," she continued. "I know what it means to have people decide your dignity is disposable because your bank account is smaller than theirs. So understand this clearly. I'm not here to make you homeless for pleasure. I am here because your family built its comfort on money that did not belong to you, homes you did not own, labor you did not respect, and a name you treated like a weapon." Lucas's expression twisted. "You planned this. You waited until my wedding." Marissa looked toward the floral arches, the programs embossed with crests, the guests frozen in expensive silence. "You invited me to witness your fresh beginning," she said. "I accepted." Brent stepped forward. "This is harassment." June Park gave him an almost cheerful look. "Mr. Whitmore, a process server is outside with documents for you too. I'd save my energy." A strained laugh escaped someone in the back before being smothered. Evelyn turned to the officiant. "Continue the ceremony." The poor man looked as though he wished to dissolve into the stained glass. I'm not sure." "You will continue," Evelyn commanded. "No," Camilla said. Everyone turned. Camilla stood in the aisle, bouquet trembling in her hand. She looked at Lucas, and something sharp passed over her face, not heartbreak exactly, but calculation colliding with reality. "You told me Harlow was practically yours," she said. Lucas lowered his voice. "Camilla, don't do this here. You told me once Gideon was gone, the board would fall in line." Evelyn snapped, "Be quiet." But Camilla was staring at Lucas now with the fury of someone who had planned to marry power and discovered debt behind the curtain. "You said Marissa got nothing." Lucas glanced at Marissa with hatred. She was supposed to. There it was. Not legal language, not polished denial, just the ugly truth spoken before witnesses. Marissa felt it pass through her without cutting. Months earlier, it would have destroyed her. Now it only confirmed the shape of the room. Ms. Cohen leaned close. "That may be useful." Marissa almost laughed. Lucas realized too late what he had said. "I mean." "You mean," Marissa said, "you believed my worth depended on what you allowed me to keep." He said nothing. "No one in this chapel has to take my word for any of this," Marissa continued. "Formal statements will be released. Investigations will proceed. Contracts will be reviewed lawfully. Employees who cooperated will be protected. Tenants affected by predatory development decisions will receive restitution where possible. The foundation will be redirected to housing support, legal aid, and restoration projects Gideon intended before your family turned it into a ballroom fund. Evelyn looked as if Marissa had slapped her. You will destroy everything he built. No, Marissa said, I am removing what was eating it. The line moved through the chapel like wind through dry leaves. Outside, a bell began to ring the hour. Its sound rolled over the hill, solemn and bright. Marissa remembered Gideon once telling her that old bells never asked who deserved to hear them. They simply told the truth of time. The truth now was simple. The Whitmores had run out of borrowed time. Camilla dropped her bouquet. I can't marry into an investigation, she said. Lucas turned on her. Are you serious? My company is under review because of you. Because of me, you sent the invoices. You approved them. The guests watched as the love worth waiting for tore itself open in less than a minute. Evelyn grabbed Lucas's arm. Stop speaking. But Lucas was unraveling, his face flushed, his careful groom's posture gone. You think you can walk away after everything I did to put you in position? Camilla laughed bitterly. Position? Apparently the position was imaginary. Marissa closed the folder. She had expected satisfaction, some fierce sweetness as their lies collapsed. Instead, she felt a heavy sadness. Not for Lucas exactly, and not for Evelyn. For the years wasted trying to earn love from people who understood only leverage. For the girl who once thought being chosen by Lucas Whitmore meant she had escaped loneliness, when in truth she had entered a house built from it. She turned to leave. Lucas called after her, Marissa. Against her better judgment, she stopped. His voice shifted, softened, the old tone, the one he used when he wanted forgiveness before confession. Don't do this, he said. We were married. The chapel was silent again. Marissa slowly turned back. For a moment, she saw him as he had been at 24, waiting outside her night class with cheap coffee because she was studying property law after work. He had been handsome and warm then, or perhaps she had been young enough to confuse attention with warmth. He had told her she was different from the women in his world. He had said she made him feel real. Maybe he had even meant it. That was the cruelest part of some betrayals. They did not erase every good memory. They poisoned them retroactively, forcing the heart to question whether any sweetness had been safe. We were married, she said, and when your mother threw my clothes into the rain, you watched. Lucas flinched. When your family mocked my mother, you smiled. When your mistress built the company you thought would be yours, you signed. When you believed I had nothing, you made sure I left with less. He looked down. Marissa's voice lowered. Do not ask me to honor a marriage you buried before I signed the papers. She walked out then, not quickly, not dramatically. The aisle seemed longer leaving than entering, but each step felt like a stitch closing. Outside, sunlight waited. Mr. Bell opened the car door. Ms. Cohen and June followed. Behind them, the chapel erupted, not with celebration, but with arguments, ringing phones, and the frantic rustle of reputations catching fire. Marissa did not look back until she reached the rolls. At the top of the chapel steps, Evelyn stood rigid, one hand pressed to her chest. Lucas was behind her, speaking urgently into his phone. Camilla had vanished into the bridal suite. Guests poured out in clusters, whispering, recording, distancing themselves by the second. June removed her sunglasses. Well, that was tidy. Ms. Cohen sighed. That was not tidy. It was satisfying. Marissa looked at the folder in her hands. It was necessary. As the rolls pulled away, she saw the bronze Harlow plaque on the garden wall catch the sun. Restored. The word followed her down the hill. By late afternoon, the story had spread everywhere. Business blogs posted updates before the official company statement finished uploading. Social media twisted fragments into spectacle. Ex-wife crashes wedding, secret heiress revenge, billionaire bridegroom exposed. Videos of Marissa in emerald silk walking down the aisle replayed under dramatic music. Strangers called her iconic. Others called her cruel. Some said she had planned the perfect revenge. A few said no woman should humiliate a man on his wedding day. Marissa turned off her phone. At Harlow Tower, she gathered the senior staff in the main conference room. Many had already heard. Some looked nervous. Others hopeful. The room contained people who had avoided Lucas for years, people Evelyn never bothered to learn by name, people who knew exactly how much rot had hidden under polished floors. Marissa stood at the head of the table where Gideon once stood. "I know today has been disruptive," she said. "I also know some of you have been waiting a long time for this company to decide what it is." No one spoke. Gideon Harlow believed real estate was not only land and buildings, it was responsibility. Harlow Estate Group lost sight of that in places. "Under my leadership, we will find it again." That means audits. It means uncomfortable truths. It means some people will leave. It also means those who stayed honest when dishonesty was rewarded will finally be heard. The receptionist, who had cried in Marissa's office, wiped her eyes. Marissa continued, "No tenant will be displaced because of today's executive changes. No employee below senior management will lose income because of investigations into people above them. If you are pressured, threatened, or contacted by former executives seeking documents, you report it. We will protect you." A building manager raised his hand slowly. "Ms. Vale." "Yes." Mr. Harlow used to say the company had a soul, but it was getting expensive to keep. A faint smile moved around the table. Marissa touched Gideon's watch. "Then we'll put it back in the budget." The room exhaled. That evening, while the Whitmores, wedding guests, cancelled hotel rooms and whispered to reporters, Marissa went to Briar Court. She did not arrive in the Rolls this time. She took a company sedan and brought takeout containers from the diner across the street. Mrs. Donnelly, now older and moving with a cane, opened apartment 4B and stared at her. "I saw you on the internet," Mrs. Donnelly said. "You looked like you were about to buy the moon." Marissa laughed for the first time all day. "I'm not interested in the moon." "Good, too drafty." The radiator clanked behind them, but the apartment was warm. Marissa had ordered emergency maintenance on the heating system during her first month in control. Mrs. Donnelly insisted she come in and eat. They sat at the small kitchen table where Gideon had once taken notes. The same lace curtain hung in the window, yellowed now with age. Marissa looked around and felt something loosen in her chest. "Mr. Harlow liked you," Mrs. Donnelly said, opening a container of soup. "Said you had listening eyes." "He said that." "MMHMM, said most rich men look at buildings and see numbers. You looked and saw whether the elevator scared old ladies." Marissa smiled, then looked down. Mrs. Donnelly stuttered her. "You think you did wrong today?" "I think I did something public. Public things become stories. Stories become something else." "That family put you in the rain." Marissa's throat tightened. Mrs. Donnelly patted her hand. "Child, when someone locks you out of a house that was never theirs, it is not revenge to take back the key." There it was again, the key. After dinner, Marissa returned to Harlow Tower. The building was mostly empty, the night cleaning crew moving softly through corridors. In Gideon's office, she finally removed the old skeleton key from his cane and held it under the desk lamp. It was heavier than it looked. Dark iron, worn smooth where fingers had touched it for decades. There was a tiny engraving along its shaft that she had never noticed before. "IV." Her breath caught. "Elena Vale." For a moment, the city beyond the glass disappeared. She opened Gideon's private archive cabinet with the modern keycard his lawyers had given her and searched until she found a small wooden box tucked behind old ledgers. Inside lay a photograph, her mother as a young woman, smiling beside Gideon in front of a narrow brick building. Marissa recognized the laundromat sign above them. Gideon looked barely 30, thin and hopeful in the suit Elena had repaired. Behind the photo, in Gideon's handwriting, was a note. Elena said, "A home is the first promise the world makes to a child. I built too many monuments and not enough promises. Marissa may correct that if she chooses." Below the photo lay a deed to the old laundromat building, purchased by Gideon years earlier and held in a forgotten subsidiary. Marissa's childhood apartment, the place Evelyn used as an insult, had belonged to Harlow Estate Group for nearly a decade. The door Gideon had not found yet. Marissa sat in his chair and cried then, not with the helplessness of the driveway, but with grief that had finally been given somewhere to go. She cried for her mother, who had stitched dignity into other women's gowns while wondering whether rent would rise. She cried for Gideon, who had tried late in life to repair what money alone could not. She cried for the version of herself who believed love required shrinking. When the tears passed, she knew what to do. The next morning, Lucas came to Harlow Tower. Security called first. "Mr. Whitmore is in the lobby." Marissa was reviewing foundation restructuring plans. "Does he have an appointment?" "No." "Then he can request one through counsel." A pause. "He says he's your husband." Marissa looked at the phone. "Tell him he is mistaken." 5 minutes later, her private line rang. Ms. Cohen had warned her he might try old access codes, old contacts, old entitlement. Marissa let it go to voicemail. Lucas called 7 times. Finally, a message appeared. "Please, we need to talk. Mother is losing the house. Accounts are frozen. Brent says investigators came to his office. Camilla left. I know things got ugly, but you're not like this." Marissa stared at the words. "You're not like this." It was another key disguised as a chain. He wanted to summon the old Marissa, patient, forgiving, eager to prove she was not cruel. He wanted her goodness to become his escape route. She did not respond. By the end of the week, the Whitmore mansion was surrounded by reporters. Evelyn refused to leave until the legal deadline, then staged her departure in oversized sunglasses, telling anyone who listened that she was the victim of a vindictive former daughter-in-law. Unfortunately for her, documents began to leak, not from Marissa, but from vendors, former employees, and board members eager to detach themselves from the sinking name. Invoices surfaced, emails surfaced, photos of foundation-funded charity retreats at private resorts surfaced. The same society pages that once praised Evelyn's elegance now used words like alleged and disgraced. Brent declared bankruptcy first after lenders called personal guarantees tied to his construction company. Patricia fled to her daughter's condo in Florida and gave one disastrous interview in which she insisted consulting was more spiritual than administrative. Camilla hired her own attorney and claimed Lucas had misrepresented Harlow's ownership and pressured her into questionable billing structures. Lucas lasted longest. For several weeks, he tried to project confidence. He wore suits. He entered meetings with lawyers. He told reporters the truth would come out, but the truth was coming out page by page, and it did not favor him. One evening, Marissa found him waiting across the street from her townhouse. He looked thinner, not ruined in the theatrical sense, not yet, but reduced. His expensive coat could not hide the panic in his eyes. Rain threatened in the clouds above, and the air smelled like the day everything had ended. June Park, who had insisted on temporary security, stepped forward from a parked car. "It's okay," Marissa said. "Stay close." Lucas approached slowly. "You won't answer my calls. Our attorneys are communicating." "I don't want to talk to attorneys." "That's unfortunate." He laughed once bitterly. "You sound like Gideon." "Thank you." His face tightened. "I didn't mean that kindly." "I know." They stood under the weak glow of a street lamp. For a second, Marissa remembered waiting for him outside a movie theater years ago, both of them laughing because they had forgotten where they parked. Memory was strange. It could place a ghost beside a man and ask the heart to tell them apart. Lucas pushed his hands into his pockets. "Mother is staying at a hotel." Marissa said nothing. "She's 70. She is 64. He looked away. She has assets, Marissa said. Personal jewelry, private accounts, friends who owe her favors. She is not without options. You took her home. The company reclaimed its property. You keep saying the company like you aren't the company. Marissa held his gaze. That is the first honest thing you've said. His expression shifted. Then be honest too, you enjoyed it. She thought about the chapel, the gasps, Camilla dropping her bouquet, Evelyn's face collapsing as the guests turned. Had there been satisfaction? Yes, she would not lie to herself. Some wounded part of her had stood taller watching their certainty break. But enjoyment was too simple a word. I enjoyed no longer being afraid of you, she said. Lucas absorbed that. For the first time, shame touched his face without immediately turning into anger. I loved you once, he said. Marissa's chest tightened, not because she wanted him, but because the sentence found the grave of something that had once lived. I know, she said. He looked surprised. That does not excuse what you became. What if I don't know how to fix this? You start by telling the truth without expecting it to save you. A car passed, tires hissing on damp pavement. Lucas swallowed. Will you testify against me? If asked, I will tell the truth. His jaw clenched. So yes. So yes. For a moment, the old Lucas vanished entirely, leaving only a man who had mistaken inheritance for identity and now had neither. Marissa felt pity then, sharp and unwelcome. She let herself feel it without obeying it. Lucas stepped back. My mother was right about one thing. June shifted near the car. Marissa remained still. What? You were never one of us. Marissa smiled faintly. No, I was not. She walked past him into her townhouse and closed the door. This time, she was the one inside. Months passed. The investigations did not produce a single dramatic ending, because real consequences rarely arrive as one thunderclap. They came as filings, settlements, resignations, asset sales, plea negotiations, civil judgments, and quiet humiliations. Lucas avoided prison by cooperating late and extensively, but he lost his license to operate in certain financial capacities, most of his savings, and whatever remained of his reputation. Brent's company folded. Evelyn sold nearly all her jewelry to cover legal fees and moved into a smaller apartment owned by a friend she once mocked for downsizing. Camilla settled with Harlow Estate Group, surrendered profits tied to improper contracts, and disappeared from the city's social scene. The Whitmore dynasty did not explode. It emptied. Their grand tables no longer filled. Their phones rang less. Invitations stopped arriving. The family name, once polished until others could see themselves in it, became a cautionary whisper. Marissa did not attend to every detail of their fall. She had a company to rebuild. Under her leadership, Harlow Estate Group changed slowly, then visibly. The foundation funded tenant legal clinics and emergency rent support. Briar Court received full renovations without displacement. Several luxury projects were redesigned to include affordable units, angering investors who preferred charity at galas rather than in zoning plans. Marissa faced criticism, resistance, and more than one patronizing article questioning whether sentiment had a place in real estate strategy. She kept Gideon's notebook on her desk and Alina's cross at her throat. 1 year after the wedding that never happened, Marissa stood in front of the old laundromat building on the east side of the city. The sign had been removed. The brick had been cleaned but not replaced. She insisted on that. Some things deserved restoration, not erasure. The upstairs apartment where she had grown up would become transitional housing for young women agging out of foster care. The ground floor would become the Alina Vale Center for Housing Promise, offering legal aid, financial counseling, and emergency placement services. At the opening ceremony, there were no ice chandeliers, no champagne towers, no crests stamped on napkins. There were folding chairs, neighborhood families, former tenants, Harlow employees, city officials, and Mrs. Donnelly in the front row wearing a hat with a feather. Marissa stepped to the microphone with the old skeleton key in her hand. "My mother worked in this building," she said. "She raised me upstairs. For much of my life, I thought success meant getting far enough away from places like this that no one could use them against me." She paused. "But I have learned that the places people use to shame us are often the places that made us strong. A home is not important because it is grand. It is important because it gives a person somewhere to stand while becoming who they are." In the crowd, Mr. Alvarez, the gardener who had helped her in the rain, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Marissa looked at the building, at the windows catching morning light, at the door waiting to be opened. "Today, we open this door for others." She slid the key into the ceremonial lock. It turned perfectly. For a second, she could almost hear Gideon chuckle. After the ceremony, as people toured the center, Marissa stepped outside for air. The city moved around her, loud and alive. Across the street, a little girl held her mother's hand and pointed at the new sign. The mother bent to explain something, and the girl nodded solemnly as if receiving instructions from the future. Marissa smiled. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ms. Cohen. "Thought you should know, final Whitmore settlement signed, it's done." Marissa read it twice. She expected triumph, but what came instead was quiet. A deep quiet, like a room after a storm when the windows are opened and the air has changed. She typed back, "Thank you." Then she put the phone away. A black car stopped at the curb, not the Rolls, just a company sedan. Mr. Bell got out to open the door, but Marissa shook her head. "I think I'll walk." He smiled, "Of course, Ms. Vale." She walked past the old laundromat, past the corner store where Elena once bought bread on credit, past the bus stop where teenage Marissa had promised herself she would someday live somewhere no one could throw her out. The promise had come true, but not in the way she imagined. She had thought safety meant owning walls. Now she understood it meant owning herself. At the next intersection, rain began to fall lightly. People hurried under awnings, lifting newspapers and purses over their heads. Marissa stopped and looked up. The drops touched her face, cool and clean. She remembered the driveway, the boxes, the laughter. She remembered signing the papers. She remembered stepping from the Rolls into a chapel full of people, waiting to watch her shrink. Then she kept walking. Not because she had nowhere to go. Because every door ahead of her was finally hers to choose.